Hello everyone and welcome to Project Insight's product training webinar. The topic for today is leveraging contracts and rate cards. Just a few things to note before we get started. All participants will be put on mute. However, any questions you have are more than welcome. Please type them into the questions box, which you can find on your GoToWebinar panel. We will try to answer all of your questions during the session, but if we can't, we'll make sure to get back to you through email before the end of the day. Or you could feel free to email us your questions at info@projectinsight.net. Also, do know this webinar recording will be available within the Project Insight community. My name is Chanel Harrell, and I will be your moderator for today. I'm currently the sales assistant here at Project Insight. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to reach me at chanel.harrell@projectinsight.com. Our presenter and trainer for today will be Angie Smith. She is our partner out in Canada and is also PMP certified. Some of the benefits of today's webinar are to understand the power of setting up rate cards for rate flexibility and know when the contract rates are selected and used. On our agenda today, we'll go over how to decide which company owns a contract, add a new contract, set up a contract default rate, create rates by resource type and role, burden and billable rates, copy a contract, learn the advanced rate float, select a project default company and contract, know when to apply companies and contracts to tasks, set up companies and contracts at the task level, updating rates, and properly applying new rates to the contract. With that said, I'm happy to hand this over to Angie to continue with the rest of today's webinar. Welcome, Angie.
Great, thank you. Okay, so everybody should be seeing the Project Insight dashboard now. Now this session covers the details about how you can set up billing rates and even costing rates in the Project Insight software. Now this functionality is very powerful because with it, you can create detailed bottom-up cost and billing budgets for your projects. These budget figures can be used to create more accurate estimates that can help improve your profitability. Now it also enables you to do forecasting and planning of costs and revenue based on your scheduled projects. And while you're executing your project, you will manage your detailed budget, and that includes the cost and billable amounts. If you're doing professional services or billing external clients, you can track time and materials or fixed price contracts and measure your actuals against your planned values. And this is all part of your process to accurately estimate projects and then manage those projects successfully against your budget and schedule. The Project Insight is very flexible and can be configured to your business process. Costing and billing rates can be set at an individual user level, a role level by company, a project level, or even an individual task level. Now this session concentrates on setting rates by the company contract and resource type and role. And this is the most common method that our clients use, but it's not the only method. Now in Project Insight, the terminology used is contracts, but a lot of our customers also call them rate cards. So you will hear these two terms used interchangeably throughout this session, but they mean essentially the same thing. Now there are several parts to setting up contracts and rate cards. First, your system administrator or a user with the company manager role must add in the company if it doesn't already exist and set up the contract or rate card. Then secondly, your project managers will set up tasks in the projects with roles assigned and apply the contract or rate card to the project to get the financial data. Now what you're seeing here is a dashboard with, first of all, a pie chart of all your company, sorry, let me try that one more time. It's a pie chart of all your projects by the default company that's assigned to them. And this chart is available because you assign projects to customers as part of your process to leverage the contracts and rate cards. Then you also have a pie chart that's showing you a list of your projects by the budget billable health status. So Project Insight can automatically calculate the billable health status as a result of applying contracts to projects as well. And then you can get a pie chart or other kinds of charts based on that data. So that's just an example of some of the way that you can use the data and the information associated with the contracts and rate cards in setting up companies. So first of all, to set up a new contract, you will need to be either a system administrator or have the company manager role assigned. And this process may even be tied in with your sales and marketing team or accounting department functions. And it could be someone from those areas, or it could be your project managers. So to see how to add companies, you will want to go ahead and expand the left navigation. Click on your administration section to expand it out, and then click on the companies menu option. Now when you do that, any companies that you already have previously set up will be displayed. This includes your company, any of your customers, and even external contractors or vendors. So once you've clicked on the companies, we can go ahead and collapse the left navigation to give us a little bit more screen room to work with and also enable us to focus on the company's form. So to add a new company, we're actually going to go up here and click on our Add New Company option. Now when you do that, the company add form is displayed, and you can see that the only required field on this form is the company name. And you can tell that by the red asterisk next to the name field. So we're going to type in customer 123. Now you can enter this other data if you require, such as the address and email address and so on. So for example, we could actually type in, we're going to type in the address of our head office, so which is 230 Commerce Street. And we're going to enter in a phone number, and you can just see, we're entering this in so you can see where this information is displayed. And we'll also enter in a fax number. And we'll enter in an email address. We're going to put in info@projectinsight.com. So that's our general email address, and that's usually the type of email address that you would record against the company. And again, this is not required information. It's optional information that you can enter in if you have it. You're then going to need to set options about how this company is used. And these are these checkboxes down below. So the first option, enable company members to automatically communicate with all other companies, designates whether or not any users that you assign to this company can see users assigned to any other companies. Now, if you're setting up internal companies, then you may want to check this because you will want all of your internal team to be able to see each other. However, if you are setting up your clients as companies in Project Insight, you want to make sure that you leave this unchecked, which is the default. But you want to do that, so leave it unchecked because you never want any users that you set up and associate with this company, which is one of your customers, to see any other users that you've set up and associated with your other customers. So that's pretty important that you want to make sure that that is unchecked. Now the next option, enable time and expense entries to be assigned directly to the company, dictates whether or not any time or expense entries can be entered at the company level without having a project or a task assigned to it. Now, whether or not you want to allow that to happen is going to depend on your business process. If you always require time or expense entries to be entered only for setup tasks or for a project, then you'll want to uncheck it. For now, we'll leave it checked, but that's optional depending on how you do your business. Now this company down here, enable the company to be assigned to a project and subsequently invoiced, is a very important option when you're using contracts. It must be checked if you are managing client-facing projects and you're going to be using contracts and rate cards. So make sure that's checked in this instance. Then you're going to have this other option that says enable the company to be assigned to a new folder and item permissions. And that allows you to set up permissions in Project Insight on a company-by-company basis. And again, this would be used if you have external clients or customers accessing Project Insight and you only wanted them to see their data. And finally, this last option dictates whether or not the company is active. If you're no longer doing business with the company, then you may mark them as inactive, but still retain the previous data in the software for reporting and reference purposes. So when you're adding a new company, by default, this is most likely going to be active, which is also the default. All right, so then you can just go ahead and click Save, and that creates that new company data. And once that's done, now you can go and you can add a contract or a rate card to it. So to do that, you want to click on the company name, and it brings up the company form, and we can go over here and click on the Add Contracts icon. And when you do that, the contract add and edit form appears. Now again, the only required data on this form is this number. Now this doesn't have to actually be just a number, it can actually be a name as well. So for example, we're going to set up our rate card for 2015. So that's what we're going to call it. We're actually going to call it the rate card for 2015. You could make it simpler and just call it 2015, but I'm going to leave it as rate card for 2015. Now optionally, you can also enter a further description about what this contract is. I mean, this one's pretty self-explanatory, but you could add additional textual information if you wanted to describe it a little bit further and give people a little bit more information about it. There are also a start and an end date. Now these dates are informational only. They do not control which rate card is the active rate card. Your company managers control which rate cards are active, or your project managers. So whoever's been given access to set up companies are the ones that are going to control which rate cards are active. They aren't controlled by these dates. They're reference informational only. Now there is also a contract default burden and a contract default bill rate. Now these rates are used only when no other specific resource type rates and roles are set up in the contract. So they're like the defaults. Now entering burden rates for a contract is not usually done, although I actually did just work with a client yesterday who set up burden rates. And burden rates are your costing rates. So normally you're going to set up individual burden or cost rates per individual resource because it's very resource specific. But in the circumstances that we were talking about yesterday with one of our clients, is that they had a normalized rate. So, and they had it per resource type and role. So they actually did use this costing rate on a contract. So it's not normally used, but you might have sorry, let me try that one more time again. Can't speak today. We usually have, you might have business processes where you do use something like that. So it is available. Now, remember, these are defaults. So these rates are used if there is no other rate set up for the resource type role. So it's the default rate that's applied. Now, in a lot of cases, you might want to enter a default billing rate. And again, this would be the rate that's chosen if a specific rate isn't set up for a specific resource and type and role. So we might want to say that, you know what, our default billing rate is always $90 per hour if no other rate is set up. So we're going to enter that one in. We'll leave the default burden rate blank though. Now this is active checkbox, is where you do control what contracts or rate cards are currently active. So we want to leave this checked because this is going to be the currently active rate card. And we'll go ahead and click Save. Now once you do that, you'll see in our contracts section that we now have a contract displayed. And this contract section can be collapsed and expanded. So your screen might look like this, where the contract section is collapsed. If that's the case, just click on that text and it'll expand it out and you can see any rate cards that have been set up. So you can see that it is actually possible to have more than one rate card or contract per customer, and if you do, they're all going to be listed here. And whether or not they're active, they will be listed. So although you can set up your default bill rates for the contract, the power in Project Insight is the ability to set rates by the resource type role. So to do that, we're going to click on the contract name, and then the contract details are shown here at the top. So if you'd entered a description or a start and an end date and the default bill rates, those would all be shown. And then down below here is where we're going to set up the individual rates for each resource type role. So we want to select the resource type role by clicking in the drop down, and you can see it's just listing the first one by default, which is our business analyst. But we're going to click on project manager because we want to set rates for the project manager role. Now the first rate that you can set is the burden rate, which we talked about. So this would be the average costing rate for any project managers if you were going to use that. But again, most organizations don't set burden rates on a contract level. So we'll leave that blank because those burden rates are usually set for each individual resource. But we are going to enter in our billing rate. So we're going to enter in a billing rate of $175. So this means that any task that requires a project manager, you're going to bill them out at $175 per hour. So then we go ahead and click Save. And then we're going to go and add in our next billing rate. And we're going to do that for our office manager. And we're going to set that to $165 and save that. So now that means that any office manager any task that uses the office manager or requires an office manager role, it's going to be billed at $165 per hour. And let's add in another one. Let's call it administration. So if we need any administration work, we're going to bill that out at $95 per hour. And we'll go ahead and click Save to save that. So if we now go back, and you're always going to add like new records in this gray blank line at the bottom. So if we click in that, you can see that there are a number of additional, resource type roles that you can set the rates for. So we could go through and set rates for the business analyst, the marketing coordinator, trainers, sponsors, programmers, graphic artists, and so on. But if we don't do that and we only leave in billing rates set for these three resource type roles, but we do use one of those other roles on a task on a project. So if we set like a task on a project that requires a business analyst role and we don't have it set up in here, then it's just going to go back and use this default billing rate of $90 per hour. So that's very simple. You can set up your rate card or contract rates for your customer. Then your planned billable amounts will be automatically calculated based on those rates as you build your project. Your project managers don't have to worry about setting up those rates. They'll just be automatically applied. And you're going to see more about how all that works in a moment. So say you did go through and you set up the billable rates for every resource type role that you had. So you went through and did it for all the ones that are set up here. And then remember, we're talking about our rate card for 2015, but say the next year rolls around and you negotiate new rates for this client for 2016. Instead of having to enter all this information from scratch for the new 2016 rate card, all you need to do is actually on this form, click this Copy Contracts icon. And then we have to enter in that contract number or name, and it defaults to copy of rate card for 2015. So we're going to edit that. We'll get rid of the copy of because we don't want that, but we're going to change the year obviously to 2016. And then you can actually change the company. So you could actually copy this rate card to other companies as well. So if you didn't want to start from scratch, you wanted to copy what you already had entered in and set up, you can do that and copy it to another company. But in our case, we're going to leave it for the same company because we're just going to set up our new rate card for 2016 for customer 123 and use all this information that we've already got set up for our rate card for 2015. Then we'll go ahead and click on copy and we get a confirmation prompt. So we're going to click OK to that. Then we're going to go and click our Project Insight back icon to return to our previous screen. And now you'll see that on our customer form, we've got two rate cards listed. So we've got our 2015 and we've also got our 2016. Now it is automatically set to be active, and you might want to, depending on where you are kind of in your planning cycle, you might want to set it to inactive if you're still kind of working on that rate card so that you can work on it and set it up, but you just don't want it available for people to select. You could set it to inactive until it's ready to go and then turn it over to active. But if you're starting to enter in, I know we're kind of in October, so this is actually a time that a lot of organizations will start to enter in their 2016 projects for doing estimating and planning. So in that case, you do want to be able to start applying that 2016 rate card right away. So I'm going to leave it active so I can do that. Now, if we go ahead and if you want to change it to active, inactive, it is very easy. You just edit, uncheck that is active, and save. Then our screen display does change a little bit, is that we do have this option up here that says show inactive company contracts. So when there is inactive ones, this does become an available option. So by default, you're only showing your active, but you can check on that, and then it shows us the inactive as well. So we'll do want to go back and edit that and change it back to active. Okay, now what we need to do is we just copied the information from 2015. So we actually need to go to our new rate card for 2016 by clicking on it. And we need to update these rates. So it just copied over the ones from the 2015. So to change the rates, we just click on the edit icon and type in the new rate. So for administration, maybe we're gonna up our rates a little bit next year. So we're gonna change that to $105 instead of $95, and save that. Then the office manager, I'm gonna click on the edit icon and then change that to $175. And I'm gonna hit enter to save that. So you can hit enter or click the save icon. It's your choice. And then we're going to edit it for the project manager and change it to 185. So our rates went up. We're planning on upping our rates for 2016. All right, so once you've done that, created your new rate card, updated the rates, let's click the Project Insight back icon again. And again, it takes us back to our customer form. And if we click it one more time, it takes us back to our list of our companies. So one trick that you may use if you're setting up a lot of contracts or rate cards for each of your customers is you may want to set up a standard rate card and copy that as you need instead of manually entering that data each time. So to do that, you'll want to set up that standard rate card not against one of your customer companies, but against your company. So go ahead and click on your company name, and you'll want to create something like standard rates. So we've created a contract already called standard rates. So we can see that the description of it says that these are the standard rates, and use these as your template to create new contracts. So to see the details of that, go ahead and click on the name. And then you can see in here that we've actually set up default rates for all of our different types of resource type and roles. And we also set up a default, billing rate as well if none of these other rates apply. So then when you need to create a new contract for a client, you can come to your standard rates, click on the copy contract icon. Again, and then you want to enter in the name of the contract. So this time we're going to call it discount rates. So maybe we're actually have a discount rate card for our customer for 2015. And then again, you want to select the company that you're going to copy it to, and it remembers what you did last time. So it remembers that we were doing some work on customer 123 and sets that as the default. But you could click in the drop-down and change it to one of your other customers if you needed to. But for now, we'll leave it as our customer 123, and then click copy to copy that information. And then you'll get a confirmation prompt that it was done, so click OK to that. All right, so we've actually copied our standard rates over to our company 123. And let's click our Project Insight back icon till we get back to our companies list. And then we'll go to our customer 123, and now you can see that we have this discount rate card set up. And if you click on that, you'll see that the rates got copied over from our standard rate card for every role. And then we can go in and update these very easily again if we wanted to discount them a little bit. So if we wanted to discount them from our standard rates, we can go in and start doing that. So maybe we set that to 85, and our business analyst, maybe it's 90. And maybe we apply our discount rates if they do a certain number of projects with us each year, then maybe we start giving them some discounts. So you can see how easy it is to go ahead and do that. So that process of copying a standard rate card will save you some data entry time and also ensures your consistency across all of your rate cards. And again, you might want to edit the entire rate card and change your description, right? So maybe we call it discount rates used for multiple projects, something like that. And again, we'd want to make sure I didn't enter it in with a spelling error. But all right. So next you're going to see how the contract gets applied to the projects. So we'll go ahead and back and expand our left navigation. And we're going to click on our administration section to collapse that because we don't need that right now. But we're going to click on our folder section to expand that because we want to see all of our folders. And we want to click on our projects folder to go to there. And then we're going to collapse our left navigation again. And we're going to add a new project. So we can hover on our add icon and select project to do that. And then our project add edit form appears. Now, more details about this form can be found in our training session called Build Your First Project. But for this session, we're just going to keep it really simple and just enter the main data. So we've got to enter in our project name, and we're going to call it a new company website. So maybe we're developing a new company website. And then in the copy from template, we're going to click in that, and we're going to select a template to base this project on. And we're going to select the software development template. And that'll bring in all of our predefined tasks associated with a software development project, and that'll save us some time when we're setting up this new project. So we're just going to leave the rest of the information as it is right now as the defaults and click on our time, expense, and billing information tab. And this is important is when you're doing contracts, you do need to set the company and also the contract that's applicable to this project. So first of all, you want to set the company. So we're going to click in the companies drop-down, and you see a list of the companies. Now, the companies that are listed here are only those companies that had the option for the company to be assigned to a project and subsequently invoice turned on. So remember when we created a company, there was an option to do that. So when that's checked, then those companies are going to appear in this drop-down list. So we're going to say that we're doing this project for customer 123 by clicking on it, and that moves it over to the right-hand side, which indicates that that's now been selected. And we can click anywhere on the white space on the form to exit out of that drop-down. Now you can see the company now gets listed over here, and you can have multiple companies assigned to a project. And there's always one company that's set as the company default, and you can do reporting and that kind of thing based on this company default. So that's why you do want to do that. And there is a lot of different reasons why you might have more than one company assigned to a project. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But next, what you want to do is you want to click on the drop-down for the company contracts and assign the contract that's applicable to this project. And when you do that, you're going to see all the rate cards that were set up for the customer 123. So you see, we just set those all up. And you can click on this little triple down arrow down here in the bottom and drag this bigger if you needed to see the whole name, if they're a little bit longer and they were getting cut off. So only the active rate cards are listed. And when we set up these rate cards, we did set them all up as active. So they are are all listed. Inactive rate cards aren't going to show in this drop-down list and won't be available for you to select. So let's apply the rate card for 2015. And again, once we select it, it moves it over to the right-hand side of the drop-down list. And then click on the white space anywhere on the form to exit out of that drop-down. And again, you can apply more than one contract to a project. And we're going to see that a little bit later on. But one of them is always assigned as the contract default again. And again, that's used for a couple of different reasons, one of them being reporting purposes, but also the default contract that's assigned to all of the actual tasks on your projects. So let's go ahead and click Save. And before that, we'll just, you can apply multiple contracts because it is possible that the rates you're using on work on a project will differ as the over the lifetime of the project. So that's why you can apply multiple contracts. But let's go ahead now and click on, we're not going to click on Save directly, we're going to click on Save and Display Project. And then your project is going to get created with all the tasks from the template. Now there is one more step that you need to do before you can actually use contracts and rate cards on the project. And to see what that is, you want to go over here and hover on your Views menu option and select Options. And when you'll do that, you'll see in here there is a project option called Use Contract Rates, if set on task assignments and time entries by resource type role or contract default. So this must be checked in order for those contract rates to be applied. If this isn't checked, it doesn't matter whether you assigned a company and a contract to a project, they're not going to be applied. So this is important that this has to be checked. And your system administrator can set up default project options that are automatically applied to each new project. So if you use contracts all the time on the majority of your projects, your system administrator can turn this option on by default. So you as a project manager don't have to worry about turning it on each time. And doing that is covered in the training session called Determine Your Best Configuration Options. Now also, if you're creating a project from a template, those project options are set, the project options, let me try this one more time. The template also has all of these project options on it, and whoever set up the template can set up and check these options. So if you do create a project based on a template, it's not going to use the system default options. It's actually going to bring over the options that were set up in the template. So you will want to be aware of that. And if you are using templates and you do use contracts, you'll want to make sure that those are checked in your template as well. And again, templates will inherit those system defaults. So if you do set them up in your system defaults, they will get pulled down to a template. But it is possible it could be changed on a template by template basis. So just make sure those are checked on your template, because the template settings override the system default settings. Now the next option is used if you want to assign multiple resources to a task and those resources perform different roles on that task. If that's the case, then you'll also want to ensure this Enable Resource Type Role to be set by Task Assignment option is also checked. And when this is checked, it does allow you to set a different resource type role per resource on a task and therefore a different rate. If it's not checked, then you can only set one resource type role and therefore one rate per task. So you'll have to ask yourself that question, is if it's only ever going to be one resource type role required per task, and that's a business rule that you use, then you don't need this set. If it could possibly be multiple, then you do need this set. And again, this option can also be set in the system defaults and also on a template by template basis. All right, so once those are set, go ahead and click Save. Now, in order to apply rates based on the resource type role, you must ensure that the resource type roles have also been set up for each task. So to do that, you do want to change your task list display so that it includes the resource type role as one of the columns on your display. So to do that, click on the display options icon. Then click in this column selection options section to expand it out if it's not already. So the system does have it expanded out by default, but it might appear like this. So if it does appear like this with it collapsed, just click on the blue header bar to expand it out and see that section. Now in the selected column, these are the columns that are going to be showing on your display. So if I click on the blue header bar, I can drag this display options layer around. And I can see that the selected columns here match what's showing up here on my task list view. And I can just click in those columns and drag them a little bit bigger to see the full labels. And you'll see they all match what I've got down here in my selected columns. But I can go ahead and change that. And I'm going to click, I want my resource type role column to appear after my resources column and before my predecessors column. So if I click in my predecessors column, then in my available columns, I can scroll down to the columns that start with R, so I can see my resource type and role column. And I can click on that and click on my right arrow to move it to my selected columns, or I can just simply double click on it to move it over as well. And then that takes it and puts it right before the highlighted column. So put it right before my predecessors column. If you didn't click on a column here first, then it would just put it at the end, and then you could click on it and use your up and down arrow keys to reposition it. Now it is very likely that if you are using these resource type roles for contracting and billing purposes, that you will want to save this view because you're going to use it again. So to do that, we're going to click on this edit icon in our quick selection area. And we will want to type in the name of this view because we have to name our views. So let's call it the role view, or we'll call it roles. And what you could do is if you did want to make this your default view when you're adding new projects, you can check that on so that you'll always use this list of columns when you're creating brand new projects as your default view. And also because I'm logged in as a system administrator, I can also set this as a global view and a global default view as well. But I'm just going to save that so it becomes one of my quick selection views. And if you can click in that, you can see there's a couple of predefined quick selection views, but there's that new one that I created. So I can click on that to easily change it, click my update display icon, and now you can start to see the resource type role for each of your tasks. Now these are summary tasks that we've got displaying right now, and we can tell that because they're bold and they have an arrow next to them. And we don't normally assign resources and work hours and that kind of thing at a summary task level. We always create it at a child or detailed task level. So to see those detailed tasks, we're going to click on the arrow next to it, and it'll expand it out and show us all of our detailed tasks that are set up for our summary task called scope. Now when you do that, you start to see now the resource type role that's assigned to each of these tasks. And these were all set up in your template. So they were automatically brought over to your project, and in most cases, you won't have to change them. So this will save you a lot of work, and that's one of the benefits of templates is you can kind of go in and predefine all of this information so that you can rapidly create a brand new project. So as a project manager, you will want to ensure that all these roles are correct so that the correct rates are going to be applied based on the rates set up in the contract. So we can see that for determining the project scope task, we need a project manager. And for securing project sponsorship, we need an administrator. And for defining the preliminary resources, we need an office manager. So those are the types of roles that we'll need. Now to see the rates as they're being applied, what you can do is simply click on the resource name applied to the task, or sorry, assigned to the task, and that'll bring up our resource details layer. And you can see who the resource is, the work, the percentage of the workday that they're being utilized, and then you can see their burden and also their billing rate. Now the burden rate, it wasn't set in a contract. It's actually being pulled from the user's profile. But you can also see the billing rate, and that rate was the one that we set in the contract. So we set for customer 123 for the contract rates for 2015, we said that, and we're going to look back here, our project manager was going to be billed out at $175. Now, you can see there's also a resource type role that we can apply directly to a resource as well. So we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But this is the resource type role that's assigned at the task level, so it's using that to determine the rate. Now you can actually see the rates right on your task list view as well. So let's go back to our display options icon, and we're going to click on the start date because we want to insert those rates just before the start date and after the work hours. And then instead of scrolling through our available columns, I can just actually click in there and enter in the first letter of the column that I want to go to, which is I typed in a W. It starts to take me to the W's. And so I do have to do a little bit of scrolling, but not as much scrolling because I've already right in the W section. And we're going to go to the work billable rate and double click on that to select it. And we're also going to include the work billable time. And we're going to now click on the update display icon to change our display to show that information. And then I'll click in the column headers and drag those a little bit bigger so I can see the full label. And now I'm seeing, okay, well, here's the work billable rate being applied from our contract. And then we have the work billable time. Now, the work billable time is automatically calculated by Project Insight for you. And it basically takes the number of work hours you've assigned for this task, multiplies it by the rate to give you the value of your labor and how much you should be billing the client for this work. So in this case, it's $3,500. You should be billing your client for determining the project scope. Now you'll see for the secure project sponsorship task that it's kind of a strange work billable rate that's showing. It's $121.67. And that wasn't one of the rates that you set up in your 2015 rate card for customer 123. Now the reason for this is because there's actually two resources on this task. And if we click on the resources, we're able to see that. And I'm just going to drag this layer around a little bit so we can center it on our screen. So in this case, for the secure project sponsorship, we actually have two resources assigned. We have Andrea Smythe and we have Jill Project. And you'll see that their resource type role is actually filled in for each of them, and it's a different role. So Andrea is acting as an administrator role, and Jill is acting as a project manager role. And they each have a different billing rate. The administration rates being billed out as $95, and the project manager rates being billed out as $175. So you are actually able to set a different resource type role for each resource on the task. And that was because you turned on that setting called Enable Resource Type Role to be set by task assignment when you looked at the project options. If you didn't enter a resource type role for each resource at this level, or that option wasn't turned on, then it's just going to look back at the resource type role set at the task level to determine the rate to apply. So for example, if we click on Jill Project, we don't have a resource type role entered directly against her resource. So in that case, it looks at the resource type role set at the task. But for our second task here, the secure project sponsorship, we do have different resource type roles defined for that. So it's looking at that resource type role and not the resource type role set up here at the task level to determine those billing rates. Now also, because we have different billing rates for each of our resources assigned to this task, it's got this work billable rate that's a little bit different. And the reason for that is because this work billable rate is being displayed here is an average rate. So to get that average rate, it takes your work hours, so the 8 hours, times the billing for our first resource, so 8 times 95, and then takes the work hours for our second resource, which is 4, and multiplies it by their billing rate of 175, and gives us a grand total, which in this case is $1,460. And we can see that in our work billable time. Then to get the average rate that's displayed here, it takes that work billable time that it calculated from these values and divides it by our total number of hours, which is 12, or just basically the number of hours defined for each resource, and gives us this average work billable rate. So that's where that rate here is coming from. But let's click X to close that layer now that you know where that's coming from. And you can see how easy this all was for the project manager. You didn't have to worry about the rates. All you had to do on the project plan was ensure that the work hours are set correctly for each of your tasks, and then make sure that the resource type role is set correctly, either at the task level or set against each resource that you assign. And then what Project Insight does is automatically calculate this billing rate. So in this case, we had to make sure that our resource type roles were set correctly for each resource. Now the work billable time for each detailed task or child task gets automatically added to roll up to a work billable total for the entire phase or the entire scoping task. So for each child task value that's calculated, it automatically gets rolled up into your summary task level as well. And then of course that all gets rolled up to give you a total work billable amount for your labor for the entire project. Now, this is the most common way that organizations set up burden rates, because normally, and for billable rates as well. So you do set up burden rates usually by individual user, and then billable rates by the resource type or role that's required on the task. Now, one second here. All right. Now, if you were trying to figure out how much money to bill your client for this project, all you have to look here at the bottom, and you can see that at our contract rates for all this work, we should be billing the client $77,530. And if you want some more details about all of that, if you are billing clients, you might want to attend our professional services training sessions, and that'll give you a little bit more detail about how to set that all up. Now, these rates that are displayed in real time. So if you start to change something, it's going to be updated automatically and reflect that. So for example, if we double-click anywhere on the white space of our Determine Project Scope line, and we click in the drop-down for the resource type and role that's assigned, so maybe it's like a sponsor instead, and then we'll hit Enter to save that, or we'll scroll over and click our Save. And then we click on the resource to bring up that resource layer again. You'll see that the bill rate got changed to $90. And if you remember our very first contract rate card that we set up, we only put in 3 resource type roles. We put in like the administrative, the office manager, and I think the project manager. We actually didn't put in a billing rate for the resource type role called sponsor. And so what the system did, it went and set the billing rate to the default billing rate that we set up which was the $90 per hour. Now, what we can do is we can go back. Oh, let's see. I don't want to edit that one. I want to edit this one. Let's go back and change our role now to administration and save that. And then click on our resource layer to bring that up. And we'll see, because now what it's going to do is it's going to apply our billing rate of $95. So it changed it from our default rate of 90 for the sponsorship to 95, which was the default billing rate we set up for administration. So all of that happens in real time if you start to change any of the information that affects rates. And of course, it updates to change our work billable rate here, and also our work billable time that gets automatically calculated, and then also what the value is at the summary level, and also the value at the project level. Now, a best practice, as we kind of mentioned earlier, is that the resource types in a role are always set in your templates. And that reduces the amount of work you have to do in setting up your projects, and you're going to automatically, instantaneously, also have your planned billable amounts. And we also have a training session called Managing Fixed Price Projects. So you can attend, either one of those training sessions that I mentioned to get some more information on and doing all of this and figuring out what to bill your client based on, these calculations that you're seeing. Now, in some circumstances, you may want to set a specific rate card for a customer. So you might want to bill them at the standard rates. However, you still want to record the fact that you're doing a project for a certain customer and you want to bill them, but you want to bill them at your company standard rates instead of the specific rates that apply to them. So in order to do that, you don't have to copy the standard rate card to every customer. You just need to change the contract rate that you're applying. So to do that, let's click on the edit icon to edit the project. Click on the time, expense, and billing information tab. And now you're going to start to see why we might have multiple companies and multiple contracts. So this is a circumstance where we're going to assign two companies to the project, and this is the most common reason that you're going to have two companies assigned. So you always want to make sure that when you assign two companies, that you have the company default set to the client that you're doing the work for, or who you're going to bill the work for, because you're going to be doing, reporting and invoice management and that kind of thing based on that. However, we're also going to add in another company, which in this circumstance is because we want to use our standard company rate card instead of a custom one for this specific customer. So we're going to select our company so that we're able to select that standard company rate card. So we'll click on our company. You see it gets moved over to the right-hand side. Click on the white space to exit out. So now I have both my company and the client company assigned to this project, but the company default's always the client. Now we'll go down to our company contracts and click in the drop down for that. And I'm going to drag it a little bit bigger like we showed you previously. But now you can see I can also select my standard rate card. So my general standard rate card associated with my company, I can click on that and assign it to this project. So again, click on the white space on the form to exit out of there. And so now we've got both our rate card for 2015 and our standard rate card applied. And we could even click on our 2015 rate card to remove that, so it's not an option and we're not applying it all to this project. So now we're applying the standard rate card regardless of who the customer is. And then we can go ahead and click Save. Now, you might notice that if we, click on this, have a look at this, some of the rates haven't really been updated yet. So we can see the work billable rate is still set to 95, but the contract rate has actually been changed to use our default at 98. Now, what Project Insight will do automatically is in the background, update your project to reflect those new rates. Now, the thing to note is that might not happen instantaneously. it might take a few minutes for all of those changes to ripple through. So you can just set it and then go away and not worry about and be confident that those rates are going to get updated, just maybe not instantaneously. But if you do want to see those changes right away, you can also have that happen. Just hover on the Views menu option, click on the Status, click on the Budget tab, and click Calculate Now. Now, if we click our back icon, you'll see that work billable rate got updated instantaneously to the $98. So if you want to see those changes take effect immediately, just go ahead and go and do that process that I just showed you. Now, if you click again on the resource here, may have noticed that our burden rate hasn't changed throughout all of this, no matter what contract or company was assigned. And that's because of the rate flow that was applied. And basically the rate flow says that if the burden rate was left blank on the contract, which in our case it was, then use the burden rate set in the user's profile. And again, that's the most common way that organizations set up burden rates, because normally those burden rates don't change. You just, you pay your user a salary or set cost per hour, and you calculate their fully loaded cost or burden rate, which includes the overhead costs, and that doesn't change unless, of course, they get a raise. Now, it's very important that you ensure that you have your billing rates and even your costing rates set correctly before you allow your team member to enter time. So time entries get stamped with the rates as they were applicable at this time those time entries were made. So even if you later change what contract was applied, it's not going to change those previously entered time entries, so that's important to note. Now, you could manually go through and change every rate on every time entry if it wasn't approved, but that could be a real lot of effort. So you do want to make sure that your rates are set correctly before you change the project to an active state and let your team start to enter time. And again, you can get some more information about all of that in your Track Your Time and Enter Expenses training session. Okay, so let's close that layer. Now, we're almost to the end of our topics here, but a few more things to cover is that, Project Insight is very flexible, and you can even apply multiple contracts to the same project. And a reason that you may do this is if a project extends over a year and different rates get applied to tasks in the new year than the previous year. So even though you applied the contract to the project, the rate card is actually set for each individual task. So you don't normally see that by default, but behind the scenes, it's set for every individual task that you have on a project. And so to see that, click your Display Options icon, and we'll click on our end date because we want our new column inserted before that. And then we're going to go find our field called Company Contract Default. Double click on that and update our display. So now you're going to see that we've got our company contract default is actually set for every individual task. Now, if we go back and we edit our project, and let me just scroll over so I can edit my project. And again, we go back to our Time, Expense, and Billing Information tab, and we click in the drop-down for the company contracts, and let's add in our 2016 rate card this time, and save that. Now what we can do is we can actually say, on each individual task, it's still set to that default My Company standard rates, but we can double-click on the white space of any of the tasks and click on the drop-down for the company contract default and actually change it to the different rate card. So for that one task, we can change the rates that are applying. So we'll go ahead and save that, and now different rates are going to be assigned for Jill project. So you can see now it's 105 because a different rate card is being applied to that one individual task. So you can see Project Insight's very flexible and allows you to set it up in different ways so that you can get the correct billing information that you need to leverage contracts and rate cards. All right, so with that, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour here. I'm going to hand this back over to Chanel for some closing slides. Chanel.
Thank you, Angie. I just have a few more slides for you before we end this session. For those on social media, I'd like to invite you to follow, like, and subscribe to our social media channels. Our handle on Twitter is @ProjectInsight, and of course, you can also find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for the latest on PI news. If you're not already a PI user and would like to learn more, please feel free to contact us via phone, email, or request your demo at projectinsight.net. In our Project Insight community, you'll find many recorded videos and webinars for you to watch and learn from. You can sign up for your next product training or check out the rest of our webinars by visiting our PI calendar to register for as many as you'd like. That's all we have for you today. We'd like to thank Angie for a great session and, of course, thank our audience as usual for your time. We hope to have you on board for our next webinar. Thank you and have a great day.